Do you think we're going to see troops in the streets?
I think you will see Trump attempt to federalize the National Guard, which is the first critical crossroad. It might be January 20th. He declares a state of emergency, says the migrant crisis is out of control. I'm federalizing all National Guard units. Now, what could happen is every Republican National Guard governor, well, every Republican governor, that is the commander in chief of the National Guard, says, no problem. Here's Alabama. No problem. Here's Florida. Now, what happens in Illinois with Pritzker? What happens in Maryland with Wes Moore? Do those governors say no? Do they say you can't have my National Guard? Do they fight it out in the courts and then take it all the way down? What happens to the National Guard
Well,
soldiers?
if he federalizes it statutorily, right? He's the commander in chief. He's got them. He's federalized it.
Take it the next step down. Now you say, okay, Maryland National Guard troops, you're going to be deployed to round up, let's say, extreme example, like round up kids, migrant kids. Some number of them are going to say no. Some number of them are going to say, I think this is an unlawful order. I am not going. I'll go to jail. So now you've got the military not only rounding up kids, but jailing a certain number of their own people who are now in conflict with what Trump will argue is a lawful order. They will argue it's not. And I bring it all back to this, Steve, because Ross Perot once famously said something like he wanted a monument in front of the White House that said, first commit the country, then commit the troops. If you thought Iraq divided people, imagine what it's like when you federalize National Guard troops on the migrant crisis. This is Kent State on steroids. And that's why when people say, is there going to be a civil war? I don't know. I think more importantly, there's going to be a constitutional crisis around how and when to use the military. And if you've got Pete Hegseth there and a bunch of undersecretaries who are willing to do it, and you've got all the senior leadership gone because he's fired the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and everybody else who hasn't taken a loyalty test, you've got a steamroll that can start to move
right.
forward.
This is really the heart of what I want to talk to you about right today. So what will happen is Trump will get in there day one. He's going to pardon everybody who was convicted of an offense on January 6th, with the exception, I suspect, of the hardcore, violent, seditious extremists like Stewart Rhodes, the guy with the eye patch.
Yeah, and the guys who they have on tape.
Right, but possible, but
Yeah.
but these people will come out and they'll be celebrated. He will execute that trans ban that you talked about in the military, and he will use it politically as a wedge issue. He will also set about firing the senior leadership of the military. He's going to fire the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, an Air Force four-star. He's going to fire the chief of naval operations, the first woman to rise to that level in the United States Navy. All of these people will be gone.
And make an example out of them too, Steve, which is key,
Right.
right? Because right now, I have lots of friends in the Pentagon who've worked on a number of controversial issues. And this is really, really important for people to understand. Not only will he fire them, he'll probably put them on blast. So Colonel Snuffy, who, I don't know, for example, was a part of the crew that changed the names of military bases from Confederate leaders to non-Confederate leaders, right? They're all on Tucker Carlson's list now. Their names are out there. They've been publicly outed, right? They're out of the military. They have no more salary. They don't have security for their families, right? They all become General Milley. They all become Fauci. And that is a very dangerous thing, but it's also got a chilling effect across not just the military, but every other organization.
Of course.
Yeah.
Right. So how deep do you have to go, or you not have to go so deep at all for ambition to take root? How, I mean, what MacArthur posited, right, to the class of 1966 when they were freshmen at West Point was the long gray line has never failed us: duty, honor, country. So you make a mockery, right, of all of these virtues, all of these standards, all of these ethics with the Hegseth nomination. You also have the reality that you have somebody who sits atop a chain of command involving nuclear weapons that levels below him regarding their release at, say, the '06, I'm the captain of a nuclear ballistic missile submarine. Nobody who had the problematic drinking that Hegseth has would be allowed to be the captain of a submarine. And the Navy, for example, is different than the Army culturally in that the Navy relieves senior commanders, captains of ships, all the time. Very difficult, right, to get relieved as the brigade commander of an active duty Army unit, judging by the numbers. Not so much in the Navy, not so much in the Marine Corps, but in these services, two of which that have the standards for you can't do those things or you're out. You have an Army captain who was promoted to major at the end of his service in the National Guard, who has gone to none of the upper military level graduate schools, has no core competency in the diplomacy, the strategy, the nuclear deterrence doctrines, none of it, right? He's a Fox News morning host who is going to be put forward by Trump, who, in the Trumpian way, Trump is not all in on this guy. He's letting him swim a little bit and
Yeah, yeah,
watching it go out.
yeah.
I have I have an 18-year-old son who is very seriously thinking about I'm thinking about going in the Navy, right out of high school. He's like, I'll go to college later.
Hmm.
And my position is on this over my dead fucking body. If, if, if the US senators are so disrespectful, so fucking careless, so profoundly indifferent that you can't get four of them somewhere in the middle to be like, yeah, no, the
Hmm.
fuck out of here.
Hmm. Hmm.
Not this guy.
Hmm.
No way. No how. Not her. And not the whack job at the FBI.
Hmm.
Because if they do get through, as you say, right, the orders will be conveyed and they'll be expressed to the command structure of the military through the secretary as a legal order.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is the job of the secretary to be the first line of defense to say, no, that's an illegal order. What you talked about is, I think, the very chilling scenario, which is he calls to active duty National Guard troops, and no one can stop that taking. And you have a deployment of red state National Guard into blue states.
I don't know if they'll do that. That's the question, right? Like these are the kind of questions, right? And that's where we don't know. I think, if I can pause there for a second. Number one, like, I'm getting a lot of those phone calls right now. Hey, my son or daughter's thinking about joining. What would you tell them? I'd say, first of all, if he or she is 17, it's not up to you. They can do it on their own. And so,
Theoretically.
right, you got to hope that they've laid the foundation and they're going to make the right choices.
Hmm.
But I think it's the right question, because when you talk about all these nominees, I would give them what I've called the school principal test. Would you be okay with Pete Hegseth or Kash Patel or any number of them being the school principal for your 17-year-old daughter? And I'm using daughter specifically, right? Would you be okay with that person being the principal of your 17-year-old daughter's school? If not, why are you okay with that person being the commander or the leader of your 17-year-old daughter in the Marine Corps? Because that's what we're offering them up to do. It's not like they're just going to run a Walmart here. I mean, they are the moral, functional, bureaucratic leader that your kids, for those especially that have kids in the service, are going to have to look to. But I think there's a bigger thing here, Steve, when we talk about all these elements. I don't think the Democrats realize how bad they've lost. Like, this is so much gone, right? Because it's not just the institutions. Like MSNBC, that you and I are on all the time, right? It's so tiny, and CNN is so irrelevant. And they could be gone, gobbled up by Elon in 3 months or a year, right? They're losing in the media. They've lost all three chambers. They're losing in fundraising. They're losing on sports. They're losing on culture. They're losing on gender. They've lost so many things that you have to understand that, because they're all interconnected. Because when I say he's going to fire generals, he's not just going to fire them. they're going to be on Elon's Twitter feed, right? And the level of intimidation and the way this whole flywheel is going to kick in is really faster and more dangerous, I think, than most people realize. So when people say, "Oh, Fox News host," that's kind of who you want for this moment, because he knows how to pull all those levers. Pete Hegseth, again, ran political organizations that were funded by dedicated donors that invested in Pete Hegseth 20 years ago. They built him for this moment. And then he had a corresponding seat at Fox. So when the Republicans wanted to bang on Obama about the VA and they wanted to punish the Democrats and make them look weak on national security, Hegseth's been doing it for years on Fox. So this is an example of how it can all come together.
I'm Steve Schmidt. This is The Warning, and I invite you to subscribe on our Substack, on our YouTube channel. Follow us. Welcome to the community.